In the early 80s, agriculture was suffering a period of depression, primarily because of low agricultural prices. And this was having an impact all the way across the country. But it was particularly severe in New York and in the Northeast. And I think the thing that really brought it home were a couple of suicides.
Hey Dick, how you doing?
Good, yourself?
A lot of things, I think, came together at the same time, mostly economic, but throughout the Midwest and in many other agricultural areas of the country, farmland values had been increasing rapidly. Prices were good in the late 70s and about 1981 or 2. And then all of a sudden, farm product prices took a tumble. And people started to go bankrupt. They couldn't make their payments. They lost their farms. And all of those problems really came out in newspapers and every place else, and it was a real crisis.
I appointed a task force chaired by Cindy Noble, or under Cindy Noble's direction as Director of Cooperative Extension, chaired by John Brake, professor of the Myers Professor of Farm Management, and Jane McGonigal, who was an Extension Senior Associate. And they got a group of colleagues together, and they did a quick study of what the situation was. They looked into what was going on in some other states. And they came back with a recommendation that we really needed to do something different than what we were doing. And there were a couple critical things that they pinpointed. One was that a lot of the people who were suffering from economic stress were not interacting with our existing extension system. They were either too proud or they were just below the radar scope, and so they weren't in touch with our typical system. And this shouldn't have surprised us because traditionally Cooperative Extension has done a much better job of interacting with commercial growers and those who were on the upper end of the scale. And so that was a real concern, that we weren't getting to these people through the normal extension system. And so it said that we maybe needed some sort of a special program. The second thing that came out pretty clearly in this task force report was that, and this was a time when there was a lot of talk about safety nets socially, that many of these people were falling through the safety net because the safety net that's designed primarily for urban areas just doesn't work well in rural areas. Rural residents, in many cases, are too proud to access social services, ask for help from the county health department or from social services departments and so on. And so those two things said that we needed a program that could get around these two special problems.
It was out of that committee that came a recommendation to set up an 800 number system to reach out to agriculture and people who were having difficulties. The fascinating thing to me about it was that this FarmNet program came into being 6 weeks after the Director Noble and Dean Call said, go for it, get it going. Now, universities are not known for doing anything much in 6 weeks. And so this, in some ways, was a miracle that it happened so rapidly.
We had some people scattered throughout the state who we knew were experienced agricultural consultants. They'd worked in cooperative extension and retired and so on. And we very quickly put together a network of, I think, 10 to a dozen people on a regional basis who we could call on, who would go and visit and work with a farm family, discuss the economic situation, see what the possible solutions were, counsel with them, if necessary, get legal help and where we would pay, and so on. And so that became the FarmNet program with the substantial help of the state, who the governor's office and others responded very quickly to our request.
Originally, we envisioned that we needed farm financial consultants that would go out look at the farm business and the finances of the farm business to see whether the individual farmer could turn the situation around, what might be done to help them. And we soon learned that that wasn't sufficient, that in fact farmers view themselves not as John Smith, but as John Smith farmer. And if John Smith was failing as a farmer, John Smith failed as a person. And so we put together some, what we called at that time, personal consultants, people who had training in sociology, if you will, maybe a little bit of psychology kind of thing, but to help people see that just because one ran into business problems didn't mean that they were personal failures.
Farms are family businesses, and so the family dynamics as well as economics, I mean, problems aren't based on a discipline. Problems are much broader than a discipline. And so it was recognized fairly early on that you really needed to think about the family situation and the family focus, as well as the economic piece for the farm.
We were receiving some personal stress calls. A lot of the farmers aren't sure what to do. Due to the early frost this year, their crop is already affected, and then to have the drought on top of that, they're already looking at serious consequences.
FarmNet is working one-on-one with farm families to guide them through a process of any type of change in their farm business. The change could be they need to improve communication, or the change could be that they need to reorganize or change the way that business is done. And many times it's proactive. It may not be a crisis. It could be a farm family calling in and saying that the next generation is interested. We'd like to identify some areas that we need improvement on so we can move forward with our business and improve in the future. Or it could be a crisis type situation where a barn is burned down and their people have no place, are wondering who they could turn to and guide them through significant turmoil in order to make some improvements in the business and decide which direction they want to go in the future.
It seemed to me, after I got some experience with USDA, that we were delivering assistance from Congress, but it didn't seem to ever solve problems. It put them off, or it put Band-Aids on them. It was a good thing. Often it helped farmers get through a year or even two. But having some experience with FarmNet, having worked here at Cornell, I knew that their charge was to work directly with farmers, to understand pretty much the whole picture that a farmer and their family face, and to bring solutions and options to them that programs on a national scale couldn't do.
We basically give them their options, and then we help pull together the team, and the team can get the job done. And we're there as kind of like just a support person for the farm's decision, and make sure that it carries through from planning through implementation.
We have access to faculty and educational materials so that we can provide training for our consultants. We provide workshops for them so that they can be constantly updated on new legislation, new techniques, the current economic situation, so that our consultants, in addition to the work that they do on their own to maintain their ability to be current and responsive, also have the resources of Cornell University.
The Vitale Farm got involved with FarmNet through one of our consultants, Russ Hodnett, with whom they had built up a relationship over the years, and they knew that Russ was connected with FarmNet.
New York FarmNet, may I help you? Okay. Russ is definitely available to come out to the farm and meet with you to discuss your options, whether
The call would come into our office, and then the consultant is assigned, and Russ was the individual who could best work with that individual case because he knew them. There was a buildup of trust over the years, and they were confident in Russ's capabilities and what could be done, and they knew that there was going to be follow-up when they contacted Russ.
This call come and said, we've had a fire. And, well, there's some questions. Would Russ be able to come by and visit? I remember that morning very clearly. I drove in here, the fire was still burning.
We got up, we were doing chores, and we looked out in the barnyard and there was smoke. We went upstairs in the barn and we saw that the barn had a fire up there. So Warren and I, we went up in the barn. We tried to pull a wagon out, and the wagon caught on fire. So we said, "The heck, let's get out of here."
Well, the morning the barn burned, my husband and our son and myself, we stood there and we just didn't know what to do. And my husband said to me to call the trucker that the cows were going to go to Senate to sale that afternoon. And I said, wait, let's think about this. Don't make a quick decision like that. So I said, let's call Russ.
I made the suggestion, why don't we just get some people together to help us think through this? Why don't we get your veterinarian, your banker, the person that does your artificial breeding, any other people you can think of, and have them come and we'll sit down and just discuss this matter. But we just talked around the table and we brought up a whole new concept for Paul to think about. I had a couple places in mind where we'd done some things that were a little bit different than the way we've done it before, not quite as costly. And I said, maybe you ought to visit them.
He suggested that we go see a couple of farms, a couple of different farms. And so we went, my wife and I and my son, and we were really impressed about what we saw. So we thought we'd go that route. And before this happened, I never cared for a freestall barn, flat parlor, I didn't even want to hear about. But once we saw it and saw it in operation, it was thought it would be a really good thing to have. First of all, it's economical. It's about a quarter or less the cost of a pit parlor, a regular parlor. Plus, a regular parlor, if you got a slow cow, she holds up the whole side. Or with this flat parlor, they're all individual headlocks. One cow's done, you let her out and put another cow in. It doesn't matter if you got a slow cow. She can stay there the whole time. You still got 7 more, because we got 8 units. You got 7 more that you milk in, and you can hardly keep up with them anyhow. We start at 4 o'clock in the morning, and we can do everything: milk the cows, feed the cows, clean the barns, do the heifers, and feed the heifers. And we're done by 6:30, 7 o'clock, and everything's done with the cows, which gives us the rest of the day to do the field work as we grow our own crops. And it takes quite a bit of time to grow crops. And before, you used to work night and day to get the crops in, and now you can do them timely and have an enjoyable life at the same time. I never could dream that we would do it what we did on our own. I know we couldn't have done it on our own without advice of other people. And without Russ, calling Russ, we would have been in the dark.
It's probably the hardest thing I ever done. Why? Because you're working with people one-on-one, with people that may have concerns or problems, but they also have an awful lot of pride. And even though they're doing something that maybe they shouldn't, it's what they've always done, and they kind of feel that, well, I should be able to still do it. So it's probably the most difficult because it is the most sensitive thing. You've got to be careful. And at no time do you want to be the know-it-all? You're a facilitator. A person can help them walk through or think through their situation. Help provide for them the options that are available. They must select the options, but you tell them that you're willing to help them walk through that option.
Here's where the old barn used to be. What we do as financial consultants is try to look at the farmer's point of view, the farmer's situation, not from a lending or a selling standpoint, but maybe put ourselves in his shoes, and then that way the communication level with the farmer and the family is a lot better. It tends to bring out a lot of information in our interviews that we're able to work with down the road when we're talking to lenders or talking to feed dealers or whoever we might be talking with in order to assist the farmer and his family.
Back in the late 90s, first part of 2000, we had some, production was down, prices weren't there, and I was getting in a situation that felt that I needed another pair of eyes to look at this, to meet with FarmNet and talk them over if this was a salvageable operation, if things are moving forward, what can I do to make a better operation, and meet with the banks. And that's when Dick Howard came and we sat down. Dick spent a lot of time analyzing things, and we did different scenarios to see if it was feasible to move forward or was it time to look at something different.
We came across a conclusion that based on a number of factors, the farm, the production, the maintenance, the equipment, that Steve should be farming at least another year to see if he could have a successful year. And if he did, that would help turn the tide in his financial problems. So we sat down and put together the facts and the figures as we saw them, and then made arrangements with the bank in order to sit down with them and show them the way we looked at the operation. The banker was comfortable with the figures that Steve and I had come up with as far as his operation for the year 2002, and he indicated to us that he would be willing to extend the line of credit that was needed in order to pay the operating expenses for that spring and summer until the crop came in, as long as New York FarmNet would monitor Steve's operation, and if there were any problems to consult with the bank and run them by him. Steve didn't have any problems that fall. He came through very good and was able to meet all his commitments, and then FarmNet stepped back, and Steve has operated like that since then.
After finding that it is salvageable, I decided I wanted to stay in FarmNet. That's all I've done all my life, and this is where I'm at today. And hopefully I can continue on until my retirement.
At Rita Kellogg Farm, a call came in, and another one of our consultants, Anita Cassard, responded to that call, and she was able to work through a number of different issues that resulted in a very positive outcome.
One of their members came here for a tour, and I can't remember her name. Isn't that terrible? This is quite a long time ago. And we got to talking and everything, you know, and she said, well, Rita, do you mind if I leave some brochures about FarmNet here, you know, in case you have any visitors who might be interested? And I said, yeah, sure. lo and behold, I was the one who got interested. The economy has really shaken up a lot of farmers, then as well as today. I was ready to pack it in. Just too much pressure, you know, and you just don't know everything, and things were getting really bad, really bad. We didn't know how to cope with things, and we wound up needing FarmNet's assistance in getting us reorganized and teaching us some things that we overlooked. I don't want to say that we didn't know. It's just that when you're in a panic, you forget. And FarmNet says, okay, calm down. Take 2 steps back, then look forward.
When I started to work with Rita, it was under emergency circumstances, which then eventually developed into more of a management plan where we actually had time to sit down and plan out what needed to be done for the farm at that time, and now and for the future also. So after taking care of the initial crisis, which was a financial crisis at the time, we attempted to bring Rita into a time management plan. It was very difficult for her because there was one farmer, one woman, one wife, one mother who handled all of it. And we had 3 generations on the farm, which we still do. So the idea was that not only was she a full-time farmer and retailer, she was also a mother and a wife, and that was a little difficult at times. So we had to really try to find a plan where all this could work together. And FarmNet helped her with some of the basic steps to, number 1, take care of yourself. In order to give, you have to be able to give, you have to have something for yourself. You have to draw out of a strength that you find. So we taught her to take time for herself, to sit down and work with technology, which at the time she just barely had a glimpse of. So to become computer savvy was important. It was part of the plan, the long-range plan. And then also to not take everything as a crisis immediately. In other words, sometimes crises appear to be crisis, but they're not. So we gradually went through the whole process, and eventually at one point it became something doable. It became something manageable. And from that point on, I think Rita took off and was able to concentrate on the future rather than the immediate situation of how to address what was the problem.
Sugar, and then this way that would tap into the health food market as well.
Sure.
Even though our milk and cheese.
She is a strong woman. She wants to be successful, and as a consultant, I want her to be successful. It's a reflection of yourself almost. You see when the accomplishment happens, how much is it due to what you can give that person, and how much can you gain back from that person. It's a friendship based on a business experience. It's a friendship based on helping another human being. And as I always say, food is very important to me. I think food is important to all of us. We can't live without it. We can live without cars. We can't live without food. We can't be without farmers. So my passion is to keep the farming community alive, to keep people like Rita in business, not to watch them go out of business. So I will do everything in my power to make sure that what expertise that I can bring to her to help her sustain the business and grow the business and hopefully keep it growing so that her children eventually can take over and run it, and she can possibly retire on this farm and do the same things that her parents are doing now, helping her. Maybe she will be able to help her children.
Well, you know, at first you become a little shy because you don't want to, some people don't want to admit that they need help. And I guess I was one of them. Hey, we can do this. No, you can't, And a fresh perspective into our business is what Anita was for us. So, instead of her being a FarmNet representative, she became my buddy, my best friend. I can't help it. There's just a relationship you build because this woman helps you hold your future back in your hands. And that's what FarmNet is. Okay, that's enough about that.